Hi, are you someone who's skeptical about self-help? Or maybe you've tried it and it hasn't worked or left you confused? I'm here to help you with that. I'm going to tell you what's wrong with self-help and what's right, what's bad content and how to sniff it out. I'll also show you what you can rely on, and I'll show you how to walk the fine line between keeping an open mind and knowing what to toss out. How to spot a bullshit artist and who you can trust, at least a little bit. And if you stay till the end, I'll give you 5 questions you can use to evaluate any self-help material. I'm Neil Biabam, an investigative journalist turned master coach. I've spent 25 years and over 10,000 coaching hours testing what actually works in personal development. On this channel, I cut through the noise and give you the performance-tested, evidence-based 10% that delivers real results. In other words, I provide a self-help platform that you can rely on. To kick off, let me share with you a major problem that the self-help industrial complex has that nobody really recognizes. And this problem is at the core of the self-help game, and that is that people need to sell their ideas to make money. Now, if you look throughout history, spiritual guides were people who opted out of society to explore, hold that energy, and give us back what we couldn't get from our daily efforts. That was the contract. And society supported them through alms, by which I mean, those people walking around with begging bowls, and tithes. Today, those structures don't exist. So people who genuinely want to do the work have to become peddlers and influencers. And that corrupts everything. It corrupts the work, it corrupts the people, it corrupts our trust in them. There's nothing we can do about that. We're not going to change the world in this way in an instant. But it does help to be aware of the phenomenon and how it impacts us. It helps in the sense that you can explain your suspicion of self-help gurus. And that suspicion is partly because you can feel a broken social contract, and partly because you can sense how it's potentially corrupted the material and maybe even the person delivering it. And on that, when I say corrupt, I don't mean that every self-help guru is corrupt. I mean it in the more rhetorical sense. And I would say that almost without exception, the people I've met who peddle self-help in one way or another have good intentions and genuinely want to help people and make a better world. I really mean that. I've met some of the top people, and they genuinely have good hearts. There are exceptions, however, and they're important ones. Some of the very best teachers I've encountered have been, in my experience, unsavory as people. And that's a euphemism, to put it lightly. More accurate words would be greedy, manipulative, self-righteous. Terms like narcissist and sociopath are overused in today's world, but we're pointing a little bit in that direction. If you watch the series Wild Wild Country about Osho, you'll see exactly what I mean in its extreme form. The funny thing is, as with Osho, their work was genius, all of them, all of the ones I refer to, and very influential. So maybe the one comes with the other. I can't answer that question. What's important is I never let their way of being get in my way of understanding and continuing to use their work. I may have rejected them as people, but I didn't reject their teachings, not the ones that I saw were true and valuable. After all, you get power-hungry priests and politicians, but that on its own doesn't negate the benefits of a religion or a whole government. Of course, those gurus would say about my rejection of them that it's my own ego at play, and in fact they have. But there's the trap that they use, and it's the first one to look out for. There's gurus who use the very material they're teaching to shut you down, to shut down your challenges or criticism. So if that happens, you know you're onto something and you should probably hold your line. Now let me share a little of my story and how I came to these conclusions. I've been in the self-help game for 25 years. I've run public and corporate programs and published books and online courses, and yet very little annoys me more than self-help. Compute that. Maybe it's because I'm in that game that so much of it annoys me. But no, I can say for sure. I can look into my own soul for 2 seconds and confirm that that would be a rationalization. The fact is, plain and simple, I'm the Grinch of the self-help game. I can remember standing in a bookstore probably 30 years ago, looking at self-help titles and feeling reactive, annoyed by all the hype and the promises. This was back in the 90s when we had motivational speakers who used to come on stage and offer platitudes like, life is a gift, that's why we call it the present. and then they'd disappear into the ether and we'd all be left wondering, what just happened? I was clear that if I had to feel that way to achieve stuff in life, I was doomed. Yet I was interested in developing myself. I felt, shall I say, a calling to become a more well-rounded person and understand more about life and ultimately teach it. Something in me knew that one day I would do that. So I shopped around, and a few years later I found my way onto a program that offered a different journey, one where you could follow the logic to transformation. And that made all the difference for me, the skeptic, the Grinch. I still didn't buy it easily. I mean, I drove the trainers mad on that training because I kept interrupting them with my questions. At least they knew I was serious. And even more so when I eventually signed on for their Train the Trainer program because their answers convinced me. And I went on to become one of their lead trainers. And that lasted nearly 5 years until I saw that even they could sometimes be full of BS. And so my conclusion from that was that nothing is all good or all bad or all right or all wrong. You have to learn to see for yourself. You have to find and apply your own self-help BS detector. And that's what I'm going to share with you on this video. So here's how to find and use your own BS detector when you approach any self-help course or book or material, including AI responses. So the first thing is to acknowledge your suspicion, prejudice, and resistance. That's fine. Don't lose that. It's your healthy BS detector. But also know that some part of that might equally be your ego talking. One day during my coach training, we had to do this sharing exercise. Each person had to sit in their own space on the floor. Then people would get up, go to another person, sit with them and share, where sharing meant say something nice about the other person. Me, the Grinch, I couldn't do it. My ego was screaming for me to get the hell out. I didn't come here for this. I came here to learn stuff. This is stupid, unnecessary. I don't need this. But another smaller voice inside said, this is exactly why you came. This is exactly what you need. Some part of me knew that if I wanted to progress as a person and as a professional, I would need to grow in that area. So my point here is that even though the exercise was going to be good for me, and it was, I did it and learned from it, and it did make me a better person, my ego fought it in the moment. And that's the thing we skeptics have to look out for. Your ego will naturally resist new information, especially stuff that challenges your worldview and your fixed way of being. The ego fundamentally develops as a defense mechanism, and its message to you is that it exists entirely for your own good. To this extent, I say the ego is a dictator that feeds you propaganda. Its main aim is to keep you the same, which is to keep you small. You'll hear self-help gurus say this, and yes, I'm saying it because it's true. Psychology will also tell you that even hard science proves that systems strive for stasis and resist change, and your ego is just that, a system inside your head that's programmed to survive intact, unchanged, and keep you that way. How it got there, we'll look at that in another episode. So whether you're a hardcore skeptic who resists all self-help, or a semi-skeptic who rejects most of it, you'll find these two forces at play: your genuine BS detector and your defensive ego. And you have to be discerning about what your own inner voice is telling you. Your BS detector has to work in both directions. It's a tightrope. There are no clear answers, but you can lose balance and fall. And once again, that's not a reason to give up. If we gave up trying to walk the first time we fell, we'd never have learned. Now that's an analogy you'll hear often from self-help gurus. Here's a different analogy. Treat your self-help search like mining for gold. You have to remove tons of rock just to get a few ounces of the good stuff. I live in Johannesburg, a city that is built on gold. Literally half the gold ever mined in the history of the world comes from under the city, and the mines go down 4 or 5 kilometers underground. There's a lot of rock that has to be removed to get to that gold. And I know when it comes to self-help, you think it shouldn't have to be that way. These gurus should just be landing it perfectly every time. But you wouldn't say that about mining for gold and give up, would you? So don't do it with self-help just because it's words and not rocks. So here's the framework and the 5 questions that I'm going to share with you. And we're working with a question: how do you actually mine for gold in the self-help industry? How do you separate the few ounces of valuable material from the tons of rock? And I use these 5 questions. They're not complicated, but they require honesty with the teaching and with yourself, those 2 directions we talked about. And I've tested these over 25 years with hundreds of frameworks, thousands of clients, and more self-help material than any person should have to wade through. So here they are. The first question: what am I here for? And this is crucial because it's both your guide and your protector. It's your guide to where the seams of gold might be, where you should drill into the rock and test and maybe lay a charge, and what you should walk right past, at least for now. An example would be my experience described earlier. That's what I was there for. I knew I was awkward, difficult, closed around people. I knew that if I wanted to progress as a person and as a professional, as I said, I would need to grow in that way. So when the exercise came, as hard as it was for me, I knew it was an opportunity. I knew I had to take it, which meant letting go of my resistance. And just so you know, I didn't do very well that first time or the few times after. I drilled only a tiny little hole in the rock. It took me years to get the gold on that one, but it was worth it. So knowing what you're there for will help you to sit through the fluffy or the boring stuff to get to the thing that really matters to you. Another example, I don't like Buddhist chanting, but I'll sit through it if there's a really good teacher who is talking on a theme I want to learn about. I'm quite clear about that. The second question, has this person, the teacher or the author, lived it? Or better, do they live it? Do they walk their talk? There are people out there peddling insights from a few months of hardship as though they're Moses down from the mountain. Or they exited a tech company and now they think they deserve all the credit, that it wasn't just survivorship biased, that they're not just a statistical anomaly. In my view, the journey to being a spiritual teacher or genuine self-help guru is a tough one. It's not arrived at easily, like a 3-month life crisis or a 6-week trip to India based on a whim. Usually it's a path someone chooses because something deep inside their soul demands it of them. When I was back in that bookstore many years ago, something in me already knew that there was a path that I would eventually take, even though I resisted it and I didn't like what I was seeing there. And then, for those gurus who have chosen that path, having chosen that path, life throws them every challenge and test imaginable, and their teachings become burnished in the fire. If you stay with me here in my story, you'll see that that's true for me too. So find out, what is your teacher's origin story, and how much of it are they polishing to sound like a LinkedIn profile? Are they the real deal, or just good with social media? And sometimes, hilariously, because life is always ironic, even those flaky ones might drop a gem or two. But you'll get it quickly. There won't be a need to hang around for too long. Question 3. What is this based on? How can I corroborate it? As with the previous point, it can't be made up out of nothing. If someone has a message like, I lost my job and now I teach that hard times are the best times, or I decided to get honest with myself and ditch the people who weren't serving me, now I'm an authenticity guru. That's nothing. It's empty. It's fluff. Fool's gold. You may be reminded of something you already know in the first 10 minutes, but then you're done. Don't waste your time mining there, unless all you want is the company of fools. But some gurus are wise to this, so they claim their model is based on science, especially neuroscience. That can be an even bigger con. Most often it's done to attract skeptics and to position themselves for the corporate market. I've seen mindfulness websites that say things like, we crunch the numbers. Bullshit. There are numbers out there, and there are links between what they do and what the science says, but often it's a tenuous link made only for marketing purposes. To be clear, for something to be really solid, it doesn't have to be based on science. If it is, and genuinely so, and the links are solid, then great. Ask the other questions. But if it's not, it can still have solid philosophical or spiritual underpinnings. For example, I trained in ontological coaching, which grew out of linguistics, phenomenology, and the philosophies of Jiddu Krishnamurti and Martin Heidegger. There were whole bodies of knowledge I could explore adjacent to that, and which had been translated through this program into solid, workable frameworks and practices. It wasn't hard science, but it also wasn't fluff. And I was able to corroborate what I learned. I had strong theological background from my childhood Bible studies and exams. I had learned various forms of meditation and their related philosophies. I had read widely, especially the works of Carl Jung, Eckhart Tolle, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi, The Flow State or State of Optimal Experience, and Daniel Goleman in Emotional Intelligence. And I could see clear and strong links between what I was learning and the works of those authors. It all checked out. So if you have that background, naturally use it. If you don't, cast around for other material and cross-reference what you uncover. Question 4, can I test it myself? And what would that look like? This is important because it means we won't fall for fool's gold, even if it's based on science. After all, riding a bicycle is based on science, but knowing all the science of bicycle riding won't get you balance or get you fit. You have to ride the bicycle. What does that look like for this particular teaching? You need to ask yourself. Are you being given more fluff, or is there a clear practice? And more importantly, are you being encouraged to practice and test your learnings, or are you just being encouraged to believe and follow the feeling wherever it takes you? That's pure nonsense, except sometimes. And you'll hear me say that often, except sometimes. Because nothing I say is the absolute truth, and that's okay. The search for absolutes is part of the problem and a deep hole that skeptics can fall into. Question 5, what can I know for sure? So be clear on what you're being asked to believe versus what you can know for sure. It doesn't mean you shouldn't hold out the possibility for something you're asked to believe. But you do need to be clear on the distinction. For example, if some influencer talks about how energy attracts, even if they say it's based on quantum physics, science, that's ultimately a belief and always will be. It doesn't mean it's wrong. It means you can play with it, test it, corroborate it, explore it. There's no need for absolute acceptance or absolute rejection. Neither are useful. On the other hand, if your guru says something apparently flaky, like people reflect your energy right back at you, so what you're getting is what you're giving, you can test that. It's real. It's in the real world. It's practical. And you can do that through self-observation. Run your own tests and experiments on it. And if you do, you should come to some very clear conclusions. For example, on that one I've just gave, if you push in traffic, for example, the other person will tend to close the gap. Whereas if you're polite, indicating, showing that you're just asking, and if they don't give you a gap, you'll wait for the next person, well, that other driver will be more likely to let you in, except sometimes. Or if you're aggressively judgmental towards your colleague, you'll get the same back. And if you change your tone to a more conciliatory tone, you'll get the same back. Cliched version of this is if you want someone to smile at you, smile at them. Another typical self-help guru analogy. But the truth is, if you experiment with that, you'll soon see that the apparently flaky statement is reliable and solid. And this is something you can know for sure. You don't need a scientifically verified study to do it. And the exceptions don't disprove the rule. Because if you remain skeptical about everything, even stuff that you could test for yourself and rely on, then you need to go back to the earlier point about the ego and its defenses. Or maybe you really are smarter than everyone, in which case we need to hear from you. So to wrap it up, I'm still that Grinch in the bookstore or when I'm scrolling these days, and I still feel that same skepticism every time something new comes out. The difference is I've learned to mine my way through it. I know what to look for. I know what questions to ask. And hopefully now you do too, and you can use these 5 questions to guide you. They work, not because they give you easy answers, but because they help you find your own. So go mine for gold, be suspicious, and be open. Test everything, and keep what works. And if you find something solid, let me know. I'm always looking. Subscribe if you want more of this self-help content that's been fact-checked, field-tested, and stripped of the BS. And if this video gave you something useful, something you can actually apply, hit like, share it with someone who's equally tired of generic or unreliable advice, or equally confused, disappointed. Check out my other videos and let me know in the comments what's one piece of self-help advice you've tried that completely failed you. And remember, your best self deserves better.